Good morning. It is good to be here with you. Some of you may not be familiar with me. I'm more of a 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon guy here at St. Stanislaus. As many of you know, my wife is Reverend Annie, who is an assisting priest here at St. Stanislaus, and so I come with her quite often. But I want to thank Father Marek for inviting me here this weekend to come speak with you, and I really hope that he doesn't get into a lot of trouble inviting a Protestant like myself to come and speak with you. And actually, it's much worse than that. I grew up a Southern Baptist in Texas, so I've come a long way. I've inched a little bit closer to the Mother Church, is the way I look at it. But anyway, years ago, I kind of know where Father Mark's coming from. And even having Mother Annie here, being a part of this congregation, allowing me to come, and you guys do a lot of good work. But years ago, I think it was the late 90s, I was pastoring a UCC church up in northeast Texas. And one Sunday, I invited an African-American colleague to come and speak when I was on vacation. And let's just say it didn't set well with some of the folk there in northeast Texas. We had 5 Sunday school classes in that church, adult classes, and I lost an entire Sunday school class because of that. So I hope you have a little more of the open ecumenical spirit with you today than that church did back in the late 90s in northeast Texas. I'll try my best to represent my tribe this morning with as much grace as I possibly can. Actually, the reason I accepted the invitation to come is because I wanted to wear pink. And we don't get to do that in the UCC church, although someone told me last night we had that option on the third Sunday in Advent. I didn't know that. I'm going to look into that. But I'm fairly certain that the good German UCC people in Ferguson probably will vote against that for some reason. I just have that feeling. Although we do have the pink candles, so that's good enough. But really, I'm here because I do believe that we have more in common than not. In the 21st century, Catholics and Protestants are closer together, I believe, than we have ever been before. And the reason I say that is because it seems to me that our historical differences are not as pronounced as they used to be in earlier times. I've noted over the years that if I ask a Catholic, are you a Catholic because you like Thomas Aquinas? Or if I ask a Methodist, are you a Methodist because you follow the Wesley brothers? Or when I ask my own people, are you United Church of Christ because you like the teachings of Reinhold Niebuhr? Usually I get a blank stare from people. Historically, those were the reasons why people came to their particular congregations or belonged to particular denominations. People were attached to their historical roots. But that's not as true today. I think today we belong to congregations or denominations or sects or whatever you want to call them because of who they are now, not who they were 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And I think that's why today we can say that we are, in some sense, closer than ever before because we understand that we go where we go because we want to belong to a community. And the sign on the church outside is important, but not like it used to be. So I believe we have a lot in common. So asking the question then, is there one particular issue that perhaps connects us in a way that makes us inseparable as Christians? And if so, what would that issue be? What is that one thing that might put us together as God's children in a way that cannot be torn apart? Well, there are obviously a lot of points of intersection between Protestants and Catholics and other Christian groups. And most of the things that we have in common are worth celebrating and proclaiming to the world. However, there is one historic commonality that, in my opinion, and I say this during Lent, so this is, I'm treading on thin ice here. I think there's one commonality that gets way too much attention, and both of our traditions call it sin. Call it sin. Now, before I get to that, talk more about that, I'm sure you've noticed that in the political world, where the opposition and the polarization these days sort of reminds me of the old Catholic Protestant conflicts. I remember when I first began pastoring United Churches of Christ, we had a lot of German people of German heritage. And even today, I have a congregation where that's true. And you'll have one spouse that comes to the Protestant church, and the other spouse goes to the Catholic church, some Catholic church. And I'm sure that probably happens here a little bit too. But I remember when I first began preaching, that split in that family was sort of severe. And they would tell me stories about how when they were growing up, that their parents would tell them, if they were Protestant, well, you couldn't play with the Catholic children down the street. Or if they were Catholic, their parents would say, you can't play with those Protestant kids across the street. So politically, that seems to be where we are a little bit these days. And so people who are more interested in peace and finding common ground are asking, what is it that we do have in common as Americans? So I've gone from the religion part to the political sphere for a moment. What is it we have in common in the world of politics? Well, in 1992, you may remember the Bill Clinton campaign may have stumbled upon that commonality. Do you remember the slogan that likely got him elected? It's the economy, stupid. That was a phrase that was coined by Clinton's favorite Cajun campaign strategist, James Carville. And this slogan, they began to realize, appealed to people on both sides of the political spectrum. Because everyone, it seems, wants to live in a country with a thriving economy. So it is the one issue that serves as common ground in a political sense for almost everyone. If you're an American, the economy is usually up at the top of your list of concerns. Now, some people take that slogan, it's the economy stupid, even further than that. There's a series of books out there, and you can find a documentary on Netflix called Freakonomics, one of my favorite series of books, written by a couple of authors, Stephen Levitt and Stephen Dubner. And they argue that almost every human thought or action can be explained in purely economic terms. And so they argue that economic forces exert the strongest pull on human thought and behavior. So in a sense, Levitt and Dubner are saying that economic theory can serve as our toe. And what I mean by toe, T-O-E, is our theory of everything. Although we usually talk about a theory of everything in terms of physics. There are a lot of physicists out there that are looking for our toe, our theory of everything. And it will be interesting, I think, if either the social sciences, particularly economic theory, or the physical sciences ever stump their toes on a theory of everything, because that will truly be a cause of celebration for humanity. But in the world of theology, going back to religion, long before there was economic theory or physics to help us explain things, long before we began looking for a theory of everything, there was one thing that we could all point to in our attempts to explain human thought and behavior, And that one thing was sin. We have been taught, I have, and I'm sure you have as well, to believe that it is our inherent sinful nature that motivates us to think and do things even if we're totally unaware of its power over us. So for many people in the ancient world and even the world today, the doctrine of sin serves as our toe, our theory of everything. It's sin, stupid. That could be the slogan that connects our shared religious tradition, Protestant and Catholic, and all points in between. From St. Augustine's doctrine of original sin to Karl Menninger's 1973 book, Whatever Became of Sin, to pulpit-pounding televangelists, to Catholic confessionals, sin might be the common denominator among us all. But should it be? Should it be? Is an emphasis on human sin really the right message for the church in the 21st century? When folks look at your church or mine, do we really want them to think that what we're all about is detecting sin and trying to root it out? Some kind of fixation on sin? I believe that if Jesus were standing here and we asked him, "Hey Lord, is there one theological issue or doctrine that we as your children can point to and use to explain our thoughts and our behaviors? Is there one thing we can point to and say, this covers it all, this is our theory of everything?" I don't think Jesus would answer with the word sin. And I say that because he seems to have discredited sin as a possible theory of everything. Now, I'm not saying he discredited the notion of sin altogether. I'm saying he discredited it as a possible theory of everything, a toe. One day, Jesus and his disciples were out for a stroll when they saw a blind man. Now, blindness was more, think about this, blindness was more common in the ancient world because there were no eye doctors. No one wore glasses or contact lenses. No one could have a cataract surgery, attach their detached retina, or have laser surgery. And I can assure you that if I had lived beyond the age of 40 in the ancient world, I would no longer be able to see very well. I certainly couldn't read anything. I really need these puppies right here. Still, even though blindness or the inability to see very well was such a common occurrence in the ancient world, Jesus' disciples, being products of their time and place, they felt the need to blame and explain, to have a theory of everything. Why is this happening? And at the top of their list of explanations for physical ailments such as blindness and other adversities was sin. "Rabbi," they asked Jesus, "who sinned? This man over here who's blind, or his parents, that he was born blind? Why was he born blind? What did he do wrong? Or what did his parents do wrong?" Jesus' answer suggests that the man was born blind so that God could be glorified through his healing. Now that's an interesting theological assertion that is made more than once in the New Testament. But I like to focus on the first part of Jesus' response to his disciples because I think it speaks louder to us today, where he says, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned." In other words, disciples, stop using sin as your go-to explanation for everything. Not every physical ailment or adversity is due to someone sinning. And especially stop this nonsense about God punishing people for the sins of their parents. Go back and read Jeremiah chapter 31. In those days they shall no longer say, and here's the proverb, the parents have eaten sour grapes, that is, they've done something wrong, and the children's teeth are set on edge. But all shall die for their own sins. The teeth of everyone who eats sour grapes shall be set on edge. In other words, we're all responsible for our own sins, not our parents or anyone else's. So I think Jesus is saying that, but again, I don't think he's saying, and I know he's not saying, that this man was born blind because he sinned. Think about it. When could that sin have possibly taken place? While he was in his mother's womb? Did he kick his mother a little too strongly in the womb? Did he learn profanity in the uterus? When did it happen? Where did that sin begin? Even today, people use sin as an explanation for all kinds of adversity. Hurricane Katrina is a good example of that. It really is a ridiculous notion, theologically childish, and just prone to encourage judgmental pronouncements from people who really need to keep their thoughts to themselves. The point is, sin does not have to be our uber explanation. It does not have to be our theory of everything. And it does not have to be the one thing that connects all of us as Christians or people of God. I think we can find other commonalities, don't you think? How about, for starters, the open table? The fact that our two congregations here in St. Louis practice an open table suggests that despite our theological differences in the way we approach the table and the way we imagine what is happening at the table, despite all that, we have more in common than not when our table is open. How about our emphasis on social justice? Isn't this the crux of the matter in terms of our public witness? How about compassion and love for one another? Regardless of our denominational tag, isn't this how they will know we are Christians? How about faith? Are there Christians of any category out there who do not encourage one another in faith and spirituality? How about God's love? Wouldn't the Church Universal benefit from a consistent theme of divine love? And finally, how about grace? Wouldn't the church send a better vibe throughout our society if grace became our theory of everything? My prayer is that in the near future, all of God's children will discover that they have more positive things in common than not. Amen. Thank you. Appreciate it.